Have you ever wondered how close you've come to danger without even realizing it? At Shivering Vault, we take you there, one story at a time. Get ready for today's unnerving journey. I didn't think twice when the Tanners asked me to babysit their 6-year-old Lily. I'd watched her plenty of times before, and it was always an easy gig. They lived in a quiet, gated community in Orlando, and Lily was a sweet kid who fell asleep like clockwork by 8:30. That night started off like any other. We ordered pizza, played a few rounds of Go Fish, and watched her favorite cartoon before bedtime. By 9, the house was silent except for the soft hum of the air conditioner. I was curled up on the couch scrolling through my phone when the knock came. It was soft at first, so soft I wasn't sure I'd heard it. I muted the TV and waited. A few seconds later, it came again. I checked my phone. It was nearly 10:30. The Tanners weren't due back until midnight, and they hadn't mentioned anyone stopping by. I went to the front door, careful to stay out of sight of the peephole. "Who is it?" I called. "It's a friend of the family," a man's voice answered. "They told me to swing by and grab something." Something about his tone made me uneasy. It was casual, almost rehearsed. "I'm babysitting," I said, keeping my voice steady. "The Tanners didn't say anything about someone coming over." There was a pause. Then he said, "It's fine. Just let me in real quick. I won't be long." My heart started racing. I backed away from the door and went to check on Lily. She was fast asleep, clutching her stuffed unicorn. I woke her gently. "Hey, Lily, do you know if your parents have a friend stopping by tonight?" She rubbed her eyes and shook her head. "No, Mommy didn't say anything." That's when the knocking came again, louder this time. "Let me in," the man said, his voice firmer now. "They told me I could stop by." I grabbed my phone and called Mrs. Tanner. She picked up after the first ring. "Hi, everything okay?" she asked. "There's a man at the door," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "He says he's a family friend, but Lily doesn't know him, and you didn't mention anyone coming over." Mrs. Tanner's voice dropped, her tone sharp. "We didn't tell anyone to stop by. Stay inside and don't open the door. I'm calling security right now." I hung up and locked every door and window I could think of. Meanwhile, the knocking turned into pounding. "Hey," the man shouted. "I know someone's in there. Open the door." Lily was wide awake now, clutching my arm as I led her into the upstairs bathroom and locked us in. A few minutes later, the pounding stopped. I listened intently, holding my breath. Then I heard the faint sound of voices outside. Security guards. After what felt like forever, my phone buzzed. It was Mrs. Tanner again. "They've got him," she said. "He's not anyone we know. The guards are holding him until the police arrive." When the Tanners got home, they told me the man had been spotted lurking near the community earlier that week, but had slipped away before anyone could confront him. The police said he had a history of break-ins and attempted assaults. Even now, I think about what could have happened if I hadn't called the Tanners, or if I had opened the door. Orlando might seem like a safe place, but you never know who's really on the other side of that knock. I've always prided myself on being polite, even when people knock on my door at inconvenient times. But after what happened, I'm not sure I'll ever answer my door again. It all started on an ordinary Saturday morning. I had just finished my coffee when there was a knock at the door. Through the peephole, I saw a man in a crisp button-up shirt and slacks holding a clipboard. He looked harmless, professional even, so I opened the door just enough to hear him out. "Good morning, ma'am," he began with a polished smile. "I'm with Secure Home Systems, and we're offering free consultations in your neighborhood." I wasn't interested. My apartment complex already had decent security, and honestly, I wasn't looking to spend extra money. I politely declined, but he persisted, leaning in slightly, as if trying to peer past me into the apartment. "Are you sure? We've had a rise in break-ins around here. I can guarantee your safety for a reasonable cost." That should have been my first red flag. How would he know about break-ins in this area? But I brushed it off, assured him I was fine, and closed the door. The next morning, he came back. Same man, same pitch. This time he seemed more insistent. "It's dangerous out there," he said, his voice low, almost conspiratorial. "I'd hate for you to regret not taking this opportunity." I told him again that I wasn't interested, but as I shut the door, I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling his words left behind. Over the next few days, I noticed him around the building. Sometimes he was talking to other residents, other times he was just lingering. Once, I caught him standing by the mailboxes, clipboard in hand, as if he were waiting for someone. The following week, he knocked again. This time, I didn't open the door. Instead, I called out, "I already told you I'm not interested. Please stop coming here." Through the peephole, I saw him pause, then nod with that same unnerving smile. "Of course, ma'am. Just doing my job." I thought that was the end of it. But then, little things started happening. I'd come home and find my doormat slightly out of place. Once, my lock felt stiff, like someone had tampered with it. The creepiest moment came when I noticed smudges on my window. Smudges that looked like fingerprints, as if someone had been trying to see inside. That's when I decided to set up a camera. The very next night, the doorbell rang again. I stayed silent, watching through my phone, as the live feed from the camera showed the salesman standing there, fidgeting with his clipboard. Then he did something that made my blood run cold. He bent down and fiddled with the lock. I called the police immediately. They arrived quickly, and when they confronted him, he tried to act confused. "I'm just a salesman," he said, holding up his clipboard like a shield. But when they searched him, they found a set of lock-picking tools in his pocket. It turned out he wasn't with any security company. He was using the guise of a salesman to scout for victims, learning their schedules and habits. I still get chills thinking about what could have happened if I hadn't trusted my instincts. Now, I never open the door to strangers, no matter how professional they look. Some lessons, unfortunately, have to be learned the hard way. I've always loved flowers, but now every bouquet I see fills me with dread. It started so innocently, but looking back, I wish I'd paid attention to the signs earlier. It was a quiet Thursday morning in Dallas. I'd just stepped outside my apartment to grab the newspaper when I saw them. A bouquet of roses sitting neatly on my doorstep. The flowers were stunning, deep red with fresh dew still clinging to the petals. Tucked into the bouquet was a small card that read, "For the most beautiful person." At first, I thought they were a mistake. Maybe they were meant for one of my neighbors, but the card didn't have a name, and there was no delivery slip. I brought them inside, feeling a mix of confusion and flattery. The following week, another bouquet showed up, this time with daisies and a note that said, "Your smile lights up the world." By now, I was certain they were for me. The thought was flattering, but also unsettling. Who would send flowers anonymously? I asked around, my friends, co-workers, even my neighbors, but no one claimed responsibility. My best friend Sarah laughed it off, saying, "You've got a secret admirer, enjoy it." But it didn't feel like admiration. It felt invasive. Then the gifts started coming. A small box appeared on my doorstep, wrapped in pale blue paper. Inside was a bracelet, silver, with tiny charms that resembled items on my desk at work. A coffee mug, a tiny book, and even a small star that looked like the keychain I carried. That's when I realized this person wasn't just someone admiring me from afar. They knew me. They had been watching me. The final straw came when I found a handwritten letter tucked into a package. It read, "I see you every morning, walking to your car. I know you don't notice me, but I notice you. Someday I'll have the courage to say hello." I felt sick. Someone had been watching me leave my apartment. I started parking in different spots and taking random routes home, hoping to shake whoever this was, but the deliveries kept coming. Finally, I set up a small security camera just above my door. I didn't tell anyone, not even Sarah. I needed to know who was doing this. It didn't take long. The very next evening, I saw him. It was Jake from accounting. Jake, the guy I barely spoke to at work, the one who never looked me in the eye during meetings. He was on the camera, standing at my door with another bouquet. I watched him on my phone's live feed as he lingered for a moment, gently placing the flowers down before walking away. The next day, I reported everything to HR and the police. It turned out Jake had been watching me for months, tracking my schedule and collecting details about my life from casual conversations and work emails. He'd even figured out where I lived after overhearing me mention my street during a call. Dallas suddenly didn't feel like home anymore. I moved apartments and changed my routines, but the unease stayed with me. Now, every time I see a bouquet, I remember how something so beautiful can hide something so sinister. And I never open unexpected gifts. Not anymore. It was just another evening in Atlanta. Or at least I thought it would be. Dinner was done, dishes were washed, and I was sprawled out on the couch with my 8-year-old son, Liam. He was flipping through a comic book, and I was scrolling mindlessly through social media when the doorbell chimed. I wasn't expecting anyone. I glanced at my phone and pulled up the feed from my doorbell camera. A man stood there, his face partially shadowed by the brim of a baseball cap. He looked rough, scruffy beard, weathered jacket, and a wiry frame. But what caught my attention was what he held in his hand, a burlap sack. He didn't ring the doorbell again, but he was pacing, glancing at the door and back toward the street. Something about him made my stomach knot. "Mom?" Liam asked, looking up from his comic. "Who's at the door?" "Just stay here, honey," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I unmuted the microphone on the camera. "Can I help you?" The man startled, his head snapping toward the camera. He stepped back, glancing nervously at the street. Yeah, I'm just looking for someone," he muttered. His voice was gravelly and unsure. "You've got the wrong house," I said firmly. "Please, leave." He hesitated for a moment, then turned and walked back to the street. My heart sank when I saw what he got into. A white van parked across the road. Its windows were tinted, and it didn't have any markings, like the kind contractors or delivery drivers usually have. I kept watching as the van idled for a few moments before finally pulling away. I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling. Something about him wasn't right. Why would he be holding a sack like that? And why pace like he was waiting for something or someone? I called my neighbor Lisa, who lived 2 doors down. She'd been on edge lately too, ever since a girl went missing from a park about 5 miles away. The details had been all over the local news. When I described the man and the van, Lisa told me she'd seen the same vehicle parked further down the street just last week. "It gave me the creeps," she said. I called the Atlanta PD non-emergency line and filed a report. They took down my description of the man, the van, and the sack. I didn't expect much to come of it. I just wanted it on record in case anything else happened. But then something did. 2 days later, a detective called me. The white van matched the description of a vehicle tied to a missing persons case. A girl who disappeared from her front yard just 3 neighborhoods over had been seen near a similar van. It turned out the man had a history of stalking and petty crimes. When they found him, he was parked outside another home, this time with zip ties, duct tape, and that same burlap sack in the back of his van. I couldn't believe it. My report had helped them track him down. I have always been cautious, especially as a single mom, but now I trust my instincts more than ever. It started with an ordinary afternoon in San Diego. School had let out early for parent-teacher conferences, and I was home alone. I had just flopped onto the couch with a snack when I heard a soft scraping sound at the front door. At first, I thought it was just the wind or the mail carrier, but when I went to check, there was no one there, just a plain manila envelope lying on the doormat. It didn't have a name or a return address, just "To Lucy" scrawled in block letters on the front. My stomach twisted. Who would leave something like this? Curiosity got the better of me. I took it inside, sat at the kitchen table, and carefully opened it. The photos spilled out in a neat stack. My breath caught as I flipped through them. They were all of me. Walking to school, crossing the street near my house, chatting with friends in front of the corner cafe. Some were zoomed in, grainy, like whoever took them had been hiding far away. Others were frighteningly close, like they'd been standing just a few feet behind me. My hand shook as I stared at the last photo. I hit at Albany. It was the picture of me unlocking our front door earlier that afternoon. I grabbed my phone and called my dad, who was at work downtown. "Someone's been taking pictures of me," I stammered. He told me to lock all the doors and wait for him. When he got home, he didn't hesitate to call the San Diego police. 2 officers came by that evening. They asked me a lot of questions. Had I noticed anyone following me? Had I recently had a fight with anyone? Could I think of anyone who might want to scare me? At the time, I couldn't. I didn't think I had any enemies. I wasn't popular, but I wasn't a loner either. I kept to myself and had a small circle of friends. The police promised to investigate, but they didn't seem hopeful. "Unfortunately, this kind of thing can be hard to track," one of them said. That didn't sit well with my dad. He went into full detective mode, poring over the photos and asking around the neighborhood. A few days later, he struck gold. He remembered the cafe near my school where I'd been photographed. He went in, asked if anyone had seen someone taking pictures, and spoke with the barista. It turned out one of the regulars, a quiet kid from my school named Aaron, had been acting suspicious. He'd been sitting in the corner with a camera the same day I'd been there. My heart sank when Dad told me. I knew Aaron. He was in my math class, always sitting in the back and never talking to anyone. We'd worked on a group project once, but I didn't think we'd exchanged more than a few words. The police brought him in for questioning. It turned out he'd been following me for months, taking pictures and even keeping notes about my schedule. The scariest part? They found a small notebook in his backpack detailing his plan to confront me. I didn't want to know what that plan was. Aaron's parents were horrified. They apologized over and over, but I couldn't bring myself to respond. Even now, months later, I'm more cautious than I ever thought I'd need to be. San Diego might feel sunny and safe, but people like Aaron can lurk anywhere. Houston summers are hot, sticky, and endless. That evening, the air was thick with humidity, and I was in the living room with my 2 kids, watching cartoons while the lasagna baked in the oven. It was just another uneventful weeknight, or so I thought. The doorbell rang. "Mom, someone's here," my youngest Mia called out, already halfway to the door. "Wait," I said, rushing to intercept her. We live in a quiet neighborhood on the west side of Houston, but I've always been cautious. You never know. Through the peephole, I saw a man sitting on the steps, just outside the door. He wasn't facing the house, but staring straight ahead at the empty street. He didn't look like a delivery driver or a neighbor. His clothes were dirty, his face was gaunt, and his hair was slicked back with sweat. Something about him set me on edge. I cracked the door open just enough to speak. "Can I help you?" He turned slowly, his eyes wide and unnerving. "Is Lisa here?" "Who?" "Lisa," he said again, as if I should know. "My wife." My stomach dropped. "There's no Lisa here. I think you have the wrong house." "No, this is the right house," he said, shaking his head. He stood up, his movements jerky and unnatural, and took a step closer to the door. "She's inside. I know she is. Let me in." I slammed the door shut and locked it. My heart was pounding as I backed away, trying to stay calm for the kids. "It's okay," I whispered to them, grabbing my phone. "I'm just going to call Dad, okay?" But before I could dial, the man started banging on the door, not knocking, banging. "Lisa, open the door," he shouted. The kids screamed, and I hurried them upstairs. I called 911, trying to explain what was happening as clearly as I could, while his voice boomed through the house. "He's saying he's looking for someone named Lisa," I told the operator. "He won't leave." "Stay inside and lock all doors," she said. "Officers are on their way." The banging stopped. For a moment, I thought he had given up. But when I checked the doorbell camera, he was still there, sitting on the steps again. This time, he was muttering to himself, rocking back and forth. The police arrived 10 minutes later, though it felt like hours. They approached him cautiously, their hands on their holsters. The man didn't resist, but he kept repeating, "Lisa is here. Lisa is my wife. I just need to see her." It wasn't until the next day that we learned who he was. A detective called to tell me he was an escaped patient from a psychiatric facility about 30 miles away. The man wasn't just confused, he was dangerous. He had a history of violent outbursts, though no one could tell us why he had fixated on our house or why he believed Lisa was inside. Even now, I check the doorbell camera obsessively. Every creak outside makes me freeze. Living in Houston, you'd think you'd get used to strangers knocking on your door. But this one will haunt me forever. That's it for today's tale from Shivering Vault. If you have a story worth sharing, drop it in the comments or send it our way. Don't forget to subscribe and share with your fellow thrill seekers. As always, the Shivering Vault thanks you for unlocking today's tale. Until next time, the vault awaits your return.